Hammer's horror films in the early 70s were all over the place. There was a lot of themes, but the lesbian vampire motif was pretty strong. Now, we talked about before about the vampire lovers, but this one, Lust for a Vampire, also known as Love for a Vampire or To Love a Vampire. The later title was the one used on American TV. Came out in 71 by Hammer and directed, of course, by Jimmy Sangster, starring Ralph Bates, who replaced Peter Cushing, Barbara Jefford, Susanna Lee, Michael Johnson, and Jutta Stensgaard. It was given an R rating in the States for some violence, gore, and strong adult content and nudity, and is the second film in the Karnstein trilogy, loosely based on the 1872 Sheridan Le Fanu novella Camilla. It was preceded by The Vampire Lovers, and of course, followed by the third in the lesbian trilogy, Twins of Evil. The three films do not form a chronological development, but use the Karnstein family as the source of the vampiric threat, and were somewhat daring for the time in explicitly depicting lesbian themes. Now, production of LFAYV, I call it, began not long after release of The Vampire Lovers. The film has a heavy cult following, although some Hammer horror fans have accused it being overly camp. Its most noticed scene shows Jutta Stensgaard drenched in blood and partially covered by blood-soaked rags, although the film scene is not as explicit as that shown in the promotional still. Other notable actors in the film are Harvey Hall, who has a different role in each film of this series, David Healy, and popular radio DJ Mike Raven as Count Karnstein. Karnstein's voice, however, is dubbed by an uncredited Valentine Dial. Now, screenplay by Tudor Gates, produced by Michael Style and Harry Fine. Sounds weird, Michael Style, Harry Fine. I wonder where Harry Styles got his name. Cinematography by David Muir, edited by Spencer Reeve, music by Harry Robinson, distributed by MGM EMI in UK, and American Continental Films in the States. At 95 minutes, and some of the figures in the box office aren't accurate, so I'm not going to go over it too much. Now, the film is set in the 1830s, 40 years after events of the Vampire Lovers. In a deserted chapel at Castle Karnstein, Count and Countess Karnstein conduct a satanic ceremony to resurrect the body of their daughter Carmilla. Richard Lestrange has come to the village to get background for his books about witches, vampires, and black magic. Warned to beware of Castle Karnstein, he takes no heed. Immediately upon entering the castle, he's set upon by three women dressed in shrouds. You can always see this coming. They turn out to be students of an educational tour from Miss Simpson's fashionable finishing school. As Lestrange is being introduced to Miss Simpson and her students, a new student arrives, one Marcella Harrison. Lestrange falls in love immediately. Later that evening, when Lestrange relates his adventure to the men at the village inn, one of the serving girls is found dead with 2 holes in her neck, and Lestrange is convinced that the Karnstein story is not mere superstition. When he chances to meet the recently hired teacher of English literature on his way to Miss Simpson's school, he tricks him into going to Vienna and arranges to take his position at the facility. Shortly thereafter, Marcella's roommate Susan Pellia disappears. When the headmaster Gilles Barteau discovers the secret of Marcella Carmilla, he offers himself to her. Later that day, after Barton's body is found, Lestrange goes through his books and discovers what Barton has learned, that Marcella Harrison is Carmilla Karnstein. Lestrange confesses his love for her, and they make love whilst the song Strange Love plays. Note the song title, we'll get in that in a second. Now, Miss Simpson, worried about the disappearance of a student and the death of her headmaster, decides not to call in authorities or to notify Susan's father, particularly when Countess Harrison's private physician agrees to certify Barton's death as a heart attack. However, dance teacher Jenny Playfair notifies both the police and Mr. Pelly, all of whom arrive to investigate. The Karnsteins manage to kill the policeman who has just discovered Susan's body in the bottom of a well, but Mr. Pelly arrives with a writ of exhumation and a pathologist to investigate his daughter's death. Susan's body exhumed and has been conveniently buried by the Karnsteins, and talk gets around that she was the victim of a bloodsucker, known as a vampire. Together with the local priest, the villagers storm Castle Karnstein, very effective scene, by the way, with the intent of burning it to the ground. Lestrange also makes his way to the castle, planning to save Marcella. The villagers trap all 3 Karnsteins in the burning castle, where a timber falls from the ceiling and impales Carmilla. Lestrange is saved from the fire, with Count and Countess Karnstein remaining, safe to the knowledge that fire does not destroy them. See, the idea with the lesbian subplot and the lust for a vampire plot works because men are being quickly entranced by female vampires that may or may not be lesbian female vampires. And that's the tease. We don't know if they're straight or bisexual or gay vampires. Now, Tudor Gates was hired to write the original script and originally called To Love a Vampire, following the success of the cult The Vampire Lovers. He said it was based on an original script he wrote for Mario Bava about a girls' school which had a serial killer. Gates liked the script enough and said it had a serious love story, but then the film all went wrong. He had to use Yvette Stugart, who came from James Caris. Terence Fisher was to direct, but he was badly injured in a car accident, what actually almost killed him. At one stage, Harry Fine was going to direct, but then Jimmy Sangster took over. Gates said Sangster clashed with producers during filming over creative decisions, such as producers insisting on a pop song being put into film to copy the pop song from Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. That was pretty big at the time, putting kind of unnecessary pop songs in very serious movies. Now, partially due to censorship restraints from the British Board of Film Classification, this film and the next one, Twins of Evil, had increasingly less overt lesbian elements in the story than did The Vampire Lovers. Carmilla, for example, in his film, falls in love with a man. Ingrid Pitt was offered a lead, but turned it down. And like we mentioned, Peter Cushing was supposed to have appeared in the film, but bowed out to care for his sick wife. Cushing was replaced by Bates, who described Lust for a Vampire as one of the worst films ever made. Well, we've seen worse. Now, Bates had early appeared in Taste the Blood of Dracula with Madeline Smith, who starred The Vampire Lovers. Now, the song used in the love scene, Strange Love, was recorded for the film by an artist called Tracy, which was a teen singer from Wembley, and was released as a 7-inch single produced by Bob Barrett. Not really sure if it made the UK charts. People's not going to call up and say, give me the lesbian love song from, Lust for a Vampire. Now, the Hammer story, the authorized history of Hammer films, pans Lust for a Vampire, calling it a cynical and depressing exercise, and suggesting that one can only imagine what Fisher, Cushing, and Bray's craftsmen might have made of Gates' reasonably literate draft. In contrast, Bruce G. Hallenbeck asserts that there is much to recommend the movie, noting that a gothic atmosphere is aptly evoked, and adding, I think it was a very good script. Hallenbeck quotes Tudor Gates, the writer of all three films in the Karnstein trilogy, as saying, I think in a way it was better than the first two. Now, according to Canadian viewers at the time, I can only say about the people who saw it at the drive-in, this was getting a repeat viewing well into the 70s, not only at drive-ins, but on late-night French and also late-night English. Now, what people had a problem with the movie wasn't the movie itself. The presentation or the dub of it was quite terrible on first release at the movies, because you got to have a very crisp color to make a vampire movie work at a drive-in. But my father saw the movie once, and he said it was kind of different because people were expecting the same kind of lesbian motif as the original, I call it lesbian trilogy, but it wasn't in there. Now, any Hammer movie is going to have good acting, it's going to have bad acting, mediocre acting. But the key is this. Once they have something successful, they're going to make a sequel. This wasn't really a sequel, but the same thematics. Because lesbianism was kind of like a horror motif in the late 60s, early 70s. Because, how people would be entranced by women they couldn't have, like the unexpected, right? That's why it worked in certain things. But I know for a fact this was banned in certain countries across the world, because if you use the L word, it's like 2023, you mentioned lesbian is going to get banned. I don't think it was being shown in Southeast Asia or, the more, right-wing parts. So again, I haven't seen this movie quite some time. For the people who saw it, to give it 2.5 out of 4, give or take. Lust for a Vampire, the title alone, you know what you're getting. So that's why people went. But the Lust for a Vampire, was it the women's lust for a vampire, the fellow lesbians, or the attempted lesbian, or the man falling in love with a woman that was so overcoming and he couldn't have her because she was a vampire and also a lesbian? We don't know. But still, Lust for a Vampire covers a lot of bases, double-edged. And any Hammer movie, you go in and you're going to say the good, the bad, the ugly, because Hammer movies are like that. It works with Cushing and Christopher Lee, but when it's not Cushing and Lee in one of those movies, it's pretty freaky. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like our latest Hammer Vintage podcast, let us know what a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.